you, lads?
Hey, Joe.
How are you, Michael?
Good, mate, good. Great time to be a Limerick man, Joe, isn't it? It's a great time to be a Limerick man.
Well, we've had enough bad years, Michael.
Yeah, I know that.
We're damn glad of it now.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, Joe, are you excited heading into this weekend? I mean, everyone just assumes that Limerick are going to hit top gear and that they're going to beat Waterford this weekend, Joe.
Look, I suppose we're around long enough to know that every team is beatable. You know, league and championship are completely different things. Are they favourites? Yeah, they're red hot favourites. Like, and the one thing I suppose that catches red hot favourites is complacency. Now, I can't see the likes of John Kiley and Paul Kinnerk and them guys allowing the players to be complacent. And I suppose the one thing that really helps it is the strength and depth of the squad. If you're not performing, if you're a bit complacent, it looks like there's somebody as good, if not better than you to come in. So I suppose that rules that out.
Michael, what are your thoughts heading into this weekend? Do Waterford go up there more in hope than expectation, I should say?
Well, everybody expects Limerick to win the game. And as Joe correctly said, they're red-hot favourites. And they deserve to be red-hot favourites. And based on the evidence in this year's league, and like I read a comment from one of the players lately saying it's the first time they had all 37 players injury-free. But we shouldn't be forgotten that this time last year, exactly today, 12 months ago, Waterford were league champions. They were rated the second best team in the country. They didn't lose all that ability overnight. They certainly didn't have a good championship last year, but they had a good 2.5 years before that under Liam. So I think there's a lot of good players on the Waterford team, but to go to Thurles and to win that game is certainly a big ask because Limerick are flying. They have all the options. And just one point I want to make, Joe. I remember discussing this with you some time ago. This must be very satisfying for you because I know you were involved in the early ages of that development plan for Limerick. And I remember meeting Joe McDonough down in Waterford. He spoke about 2010 that something had to be done in Limerick, and they put a package together. They put a system in place. I know you were part of that place. You were part of that as well. So it must be really satisfying for you now to see the way those players have developed and come on and are top of their game at the moment.
Yeah, look, I suppose I think was it 9 of the All-Ireland winning panel came out of a team we had from under 14s, 15s, 16s, which I suppose is unprecedented. You get a golden crop. But look, there's no guarantees down the road. It's a long way from under 14s to senior All-Ireland winners. But we definitely saw something in them. They're not only their hurling, more so their mindset, their application, their attitude, and their willingness to learn. Like, we didn't win the Forrestal. We didn't even qualify for this out of our group. We won a Shield under 15, but we won the All-Ireland 16s. I think we beat Galway in the final something like 320 to 8 points. Now, the other side of that is at 14s, 15s, and 16s, probably the top 2 teams in the country at that age group were Limerick and Waterford, and there was absolutely nothing between us. Some of the best hurling matches I've ever seen have been underage matches between Limerick and Waterford. So it's not really a surprise that Waterford last year, especially coming to Limerick, everyone was nervous about them. They'd won the league, they were flying it, and they went toe to toe. And look, realistically, it was only the last 10-15 minutes of that game that Limerick pulled away. So anybody that thinks that this is going to be a walk in the park on Sunday is highly mistaken. I know for the last 10, 15, 12 years, I suppose, since we had the lads, that Waterford are there. They have the work put in. I know we had the development squads and everything, but Waterford had them too. Probably not in the same scale, Michael, but they definitely had them. They had the players. Like, I remember seeing Patrick Curran underage was one of the best I've ever seen. Billy Nolan was in goals for that team. You know, you'd Ozzy and the Bennetts then coming before and after. You know, there's serious talent there.
And Michael, is it continuing to come in Waterford? Because you've been involved with the minors and under 20s.
I don't think, look, we certainly don't have our best ever teams at minor and under 20 at the moment. There's a few individuals on those teams who will probably come through and make good senior players. You have Mark Fitzgerald and Peter Fitzgerald, currently part of the senior panel. We certainly wouldn't be as good as it was a few years ago. It was exceptional a few years ago, but it should be remembered that under 21 team that won the All-Ireland is now 26, 27 years of age. So I mean, their time is now or never. So I mean, the next year or two is going to be absolutely crucial for them, and something needs to happen quickly. There's no doubt about that.
And what about the injury situation for Waterford? There's talk of the likes of, when will Ozzy be right, and that sort of stuff. Is that going to hamper Waterford a lot this weekend?
Well, I always worry when managers are talking about injured players because you never really know what's happening. Now, I was speaking to Austin Gleeson about 3 weeks ago. I actually met him down in Carriganore, and he certainly was carrying an injury. And Shane McNulty was in a boot; he was injured as well. So, whether there'll be a miraculous recovery or not, I don't know. The story out in Waterford is that there's 3 players out of that particular game. Yellow Daly as well. They're supposed to be missing, and if they are, they'd be a big loss because we don't have the panel of players that Limerick have. And it was very interesting. I read a comment from Garrod Hegarty the other day, and he spoke about the change on the Limerick panel over the last 4 or 5 years. But the change of the Limerick panel has really been on the bench. I mean, they haven't lost any of their big guns. And, people like Nash has come through and playing cornerback, playing the best all ever played. They haven't really lost any of their big guns. And they seem to be able to cope when people are missing. So, they still have a serious panel. Their panel is better than anybody else's. And that's the reason why I think they'd be very difficult to beat.
Do you think, Michael, that last year when Waterford put everything into that Limerick match, Limerick were down 3 or 4 players, Keane Lynch going off and so on, that mentally that sort of broke Waterford for the rest of the year?
Look, well, Waterford in the championship, they played Tipperary and they got over the line, and Tipperary missed 3 chances they could have won it. Waterford did play well against Limerick, there's no question about that. And I think the Cork game, Waterford expected to win the Cork game, and maybe even Cork expected Waterford to win the game. But on the day, Cork got off to a good start. We had a few injuries. We didn't perform well on the day, and Cork came down. And when Cork get on top of you, they're very, very hard to beat. And then suddenly the whole thing fell apart. And the game up in Clare was a set into the championship for Waterford. But probably the Limerick game, maybe I wouldn't say give them a false sense of optimism, but it made them think they were very, very close. But when you're very close, you've got to follow it up in the next game. And Waterford didn't do that in the next game.
Joe, Barry Nash was mentioned there a short while ago. Is there a more improved player at inter-county level than this man?
Look, I suppose a lot of the credit has to go to John Kiley. There a couple of years ago when he put him in cornerback in the first match, I don't think he was overly great. And probably a lot of managers would have probably either whipped him off or not started him in the next match. Like, no one questioned his ability, but he was being thrust from being a forward back into what I would consider probably one of the most specialised and hardest positions to play in as a cornerback. But John and the lads seemed to put huge faith in him that he was going to come good. And oh my God, I think I tweeted about it last at the league final. I said, imagine going out, I said, and as a corner forward, and your man that you're marking has 1-1 got from play, and you're playing into a strong breeze. It's kind of ridiculous. My father used to always say to me years ago, if we played a match, how many goals did you let in? And I'd go, none. And he'd go, you were beaten 4-10 to whatever. I said, I didn't let any of them in. I said, they were scored. I said, so I said, that the game has changed so much. And look, I don't know how you would counteract it. I've heard people saying play 4 in the full forward line, play 3 in the full forward line, press up on them. But you do that, then you're exposing yourself at the back. If you drop a sweeper, they'll just bypass you and hit 30 points. If you pull out, they'll put ball into some of the most lethal forwards in the game. It's just hard to see. And yeah, teams have got at him. Galway last year, to me, probably was one that could have gone. And to be fair to the final last year, I would definitely say Brian Cody got every last drop out of that Kilkenny team last year. And if Kilkenny had beaten us last year, I would have turned around to people from Kilkenny alongside me and said, fair play. It was well deserved. So they can be got at. The one thing that is hugely in Limerick's favour is they don't do panic. I think Dan Morrissey was interviewed after the match last year and someone asked him, probably one of the last plays of the game, a ball was back in the cornerback position. He picked it up. He hand passed it out to somebody, went on, took the return pass, passed it again. They put it down in the corner and they closed the game out. And most players would have just when Dan got the first ball, would just lamped it down the field. And they said, why did you do that? And his answer was, that's what we do. You know, so they don't do panic, they don't deviate away from the plan. Has been seen with the tip match a few years ago. They're down, what are they, 10 or 12 points at half time. They don't do panic. They just readjust.
You had to bring that up.
Come here, I'm sick of telling you to take off them blue and gold goggles.
But the question I want to ask both of you, and I'll just start off with you, Michael, and then Joe, you might take up the point, about how coaching might have changed over the years. So, like, I think of when I was a young lad and I'm first hurling, everything is blood and thunder, set fire to the ball, drive it up the field, all that kind of stuff. But the difference now, like Joe has just explained with that Dan Morrissey situation, is you're now coaching calmness on the ball. Like, is that something that you noticed you'd have changed in your approach, Michael?
Yeah, I think the game has changed significantly in the last 10 years. So just going back to Limerick for a moment, I think from the outside looking in, it seems to me that Limerick work on the basis that they never need goals to win a game. They work on the premise they're going to have 40 shots at the post and they score 30. But that's what they're doing most of the time. They look so comfortable on the ball. They use the ball so well. They never panic. They get the ball to the shooters. They get the ball to the man in the best position. And then inevitably they pull the trigger. But they're never forced to do something they don't want to do. And that's a sign of a good management. It's a sign of good players. It's a sign of a good system. And the composure they have is absolutely fantastic. But then they're so adaptable as well. I mean, you can throw Kyle Hayes in full forward, centre forward, wing back, doesn't make a difference. Barry Nash, absolutely. I mean, his career wasn't exactly on fire when he was playing up the field and moved back to corner back, and they attacked from the back. And if you notice, I'm not surprised by this, because Paul Kinnerk would have a bit of a football background. And an awful lot of Limericks play a support play, like football, like the three-man weave coming off the shoulder. They attack from every position on the field. And when they attack, somebody else inevitably starts back and covers. So that's something that's changed in the game. There's no question about that. I think Ryan Cody was part of an era. He picked big men for Kilkenny and they tried to fight the battle in the sky. High ball, win high ball, win high ball all day long. And inevitably didn't get a score. But now the game is, I mean, different teams are using different methods to try and play the game. And the only chance you have against Limerick is trying to use the ball, because if you go into a physical battle against Limerick, they're just going to be steamrolled. You have no chance because of their physique. They're big men. They're 6'4", 6'5". But two things to add to that: they're really good athletes and they're really good hurlers. So certainly the game has changed. There's no doubt about that. And from a manager's point of view, I suppose Davey's trying to come up with a plan. And in fairness to him over the years, he says he's come up with some really good plans. He did win Northern Ireland with Clare, won the Leinster with Wexford. But this is going to be the acid test now, because, you know, watching Waterford play the league, Jesse Hutchins is there on the middle of the field. We don't know what's going to happen next. Has he something in the bag that he's going to pull out on Sunday, which will certainly be an acid test.
We'll come back to the game itself on Sunday shortly. But Joe, just in terms of how you look at coaching now versus 10 years ago, and like, are you coaching very differently these days? Like, I'd even think teams are looking at not just Gaelic football, but also the likes of soccer and playing in triangles and stuff like that.
Well, and look, I'm not taking full credit for it, but when we had that bunch in 2010, every training session we emphasised your first option. There was a first option and a first touch. Your first touch was with your hurley if you couldn't get the ball to your hand. That was always we drilled into them. That was your first option. Ball to hand, ball to hand, ball to hand. And they've continued that through. So we had 3 years of them. I used to drive them queer at training, because
Oh, we lost Joe there. But like, what would you look at in terms of, like, when you're coaching now and you're involved at the 20s there? Do you have certain influences where you take inspiration from other sports?
Well, we put a lot of emphasis on using the ball properly, and we had a really gallant band of under 20s, but we just didn't have the firepower up front to get scores. We missed 3 clear-cut goal chances against Limerick, 3 1-on-1s with the keeper. When the Cork game was in the melting pot, we had 4 wides in a row, and look, that's not blaming anybody. We just don't have natural fouls at the moment, and you're always trying to make up. But you know, the lads were coaching the team. They put a big emphasis on Ray and Pay, put a big emphasis on using the ball well and try and create chances and not to panic when we're on the ball. But you know, sometimes it comes down to the individual itself, because you can do all the coaching and you can do all the work behind the scenes, but on the day, the player on the pitch is going to have to make decisions. And you know, sometimes those decisions work out, But we were very disappointed with the Clare game because we were well beaten against Clare, and Clare were pretty beaten by 5 points by Cork again lately. So there's no real form in the whole thing. But we would have put a lot of emphasis on using the ball well and combination play and walking the ball through the lines.
I see a comment in here from PWell74. Joe is cut off in case he says too much. Maybe he got a bullet in the back of the head from Paul Kinnerk or John Kiley just there as he was about to say too much. But so this weekend, where do you think Waterford can get at Limerick? Look, we know that Limerick are a team for all seasons and all occasions, but like if you're looking at that Waterford team, what are the strengths that you can lean on?
Well, I think we've got to move the ball into space quickly. We can't afford to get caught in traffic, and we can't afford to carry the ball into contact. If we do that, we'll be in trouble. Now, to be honest, and this is not condescending Waterford in any way, if Limerick have had their A game on Sunday, they're going to win the match. That's the bottom line, because that's how good they are. But you'd be always hoping they've come through a very good league. They've found a few players. You'd be hoping that they might be a little bit off colour. If that should happen, we've got a chance. And we've got to take every single chance we get. And we've got to defend really, really well. And we've got to walk the ball through the lines. We've got to have loads of energy. And significantly on Sunday, there'll come a time in the game when Waterford players will be run out of energy. Will the 5 players that we bring off the bench, will they be able to make an impact? Because that will need to happen if we're going to have a chance.
Joe, we had some commenters in there speculating that maybe John Kiley or Paul Kinnerk cut you off there in case he said too much about Limerick hurling.
Yeah, would you believe it's easily known championships on the way. I had the phone up on the steering wheel and it overheated. So there's a sign that championship is on the way. Yeah, just go back. Look, to be fair to Limerick, and people say about the marvellous game plans, they do the basics of the game better and quicker than everyone else. Okay, it sounds simplistic, but okay, the way teams are coached in the game, at the end of the day, hurling hasn't changed. It's get the ball, move it to a better position, put it over the bar or run into the net. Oh, the way it's been done is different, but the same thing, you're still striking, you're still catching, you're still hand passing, despite everyone thinking that we don't hand pass in Limerick, that we just throw the ball. We've just what did I say? The hand is quicker than the eye. I think that's what's catching us at the moment. Quick hands. But the game as a basic game has not changed. But it seems that the Limerick lads are just doing it quicker and better than everyone else at the moment. It will change. Someone will come up with a tactical plan. It's not the same as Michael. You know from coaching football for years. It's not a game you can have too many set plays, because especially these days, I can deliver a ball 100 yards into a fella's hand, and your set play of off the shoulder or your 3-man weave or your blanket defence can be shot straight away with one delivery. So I don't know how teams are going to get at him. Will they be got at this year? I don't know. As they say, past performance is a sure sign of future results, but we're around long enough, all of us, to know that it's sport. Any team can be beaten.
Is there anything about this Sunday that you're worried about from a Waterford point of view? Some area where they could, Desi Hutchinson's obviously had a couple of good games against Limerick in recent times, but Joe, is there anything you're worried about?
Listen, I'll go back to what I said. That bunch of lads that I had, the Waterford team were every bit as good, if not better on some occasions. It was 50-50. Michael alluded to it there. Waterford don't go from... No, I think it was a crazy statement that Derek McGrath made there last year, that anyone who beats Waterford will win the All-Ireland. So there was 3 or 4 All-Ireland winners last year. But they didn't go from being the second best team in the country to be an overnight loser. They still have unbelievable talent. Have they as good a hurlers as Limerick? Yeah, they're possibly even better hurlers than Limerick. But I think just Limerick are just that bit down the line. Their understanding of the game, the way I suppose Paul Kinnerk has them coached. Like, there's a huge difference between training a team and coaching a team. Anybody can train a team. But it's just if you can get a bunch of lads that believe in you, that will try what you want them to do, but you're also explaining to them exactly why they're doing it, you know what the result is. Look, the perfect example of it is the goal there in the league final. Seamus Flanagan, 99 players out of 100 would have shown a little jink and gone for the strike himself. He didn't. He passed it over to Galan, who he knew if he caught it would have been bottled up and wouldn't have had as free a strike as Seamus had. But sure, he knew by passing it to Galan had only one thing in his mind, that was put it into the net. Do you know?
Yeah,
to be fair,
Michael,
I think teams are getting too caught up in trying to beat Limerick instead of worrying about their own camps.
Yeah. Michael, Davey Fitz obviously took over. Liam Cahill, he left and took over Tip straight away. What did you make of that whole little changeover, the way that happened, and how has Davey Fitz gone down so far in Waterford?
Well, I suppose every manager comes in, you're going to get a bounce, and he'd be very familiar with Waterford hurling. No question about that. That probably gives him an advantage. He'd be very familiar. I think, are you going to take it off there, Joe? I see that steering wheel popping up there. I'm getting a bit worried. But look, he'd be very familiar with Waterford hurling. And to be honest, and this is not condescending to Davey in any way, when Davey got the Waterford job, there wasn't exactly a queue down the street looking for it. So he deserves to be supported. He deserves to get a chance. He has plans in place. It'll be interesting to see will they work. As you know, the best hurlers are on the ditch. Everybody has the answers at 5 o'clock or 5:30 when the game is over. And he's put a system in place. He says he's reasonably happy with it. I would expect Waterford to be very, very fit. I saw some of the training, and they trained really, really hard. Now, they would have trained really hard under Liam Cahill as well. So, you know, he knows what this is about. He knows how to win big matches. He knows how to deal with players. A lot of the players, I read a piece with Joe Canning during the week, or I heard the piece, Joe's. A lot of the players who are playing under Davey speak very highly of him. That's the best test of all. So, you know, tis a challenge. But sure, Davey loves a challenge. He was made for challenges. But this is the biggest challenge he ever faced.